This is the Onco'Zine Brief with Peter Hofland.
In this episode of the Onco'Zine Brief, I talk with Dr. Benaim and Dr. Mark De Souza. Dr. Benaim is Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President Development at SonALAsense. He is also a pediatric oncologist with over 25 years of academic and industry experience developing transformative drugs and devices in oncology. Before joining the company, he was the Chief Medical Officer at Novocure. Dr. De Souza is President and Chief Executive Officer of the company. He has over 20 years of executive and entrepreneurial experience in the rare disease space. SonALAsense, the company where both are working for, was founded to create hope in the face of despair with Sonodynamic Therapy, or SDT, a non-invasive way to treat and eradicate deadly cancers. I'm Peter Hofland, and this is the Onco'Zine Brief. The Onco'Zine Brief is developed in collaboration with our online journal Onco'Zine, where you can find additional information and the latest news about cancer, cancer diagnosis and treatment, and cancer prevention. For more information on how to support this program, visit our website at Onco'Zine. And if you're living in the United States and want to receive our newsletter, text the word cancer to 66866. And we will make sure that you'll receive our newsletter, which includes an overview of the latest news in oncology and hematology.
This is the Onco'Zine Brief. For the latest news about cancer and cancer treatment, visit our online journal, Onco'Zine, at www.onco'zine.com.
On the phone with me are Dr. Benaim and Dr. De Souza. Dr. Benaim is Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President Development at SonALAsense, and Dr. De Souza is the company's President and Chief Executive Officer. Dr. Benaim and Dr. De Souza, welcome to the Onco'Zine Brief. Now, let me start with you, Dr. De Souza. Before we're going to talk about the novel therapeutic approaches the company is developing, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Peter. I'm Mark De Souza. I'm a biochemist by training, and I've been on the business side of the biotech industry for over 20 years. I started my career at a company called Dyax. I spent 10 years there. And Dyax was founded by a gentleman who was one of the founders of Genzyme that really pioneered the development of first-in-class drugs for rare genetic diseases. And when I was at Dyax, I was part of a team that actually developed 2 drugs for a rare genetic disease called hereditary angioedema. And then I went on to do a number of other companies also in the rare disease space. Some of those were in the rare skin cancer space. And at 2 of those companies, I met Stuart Marcus, who was my consulting chief medical officer in 2 of these rare skin cancer companies. And Stuart introduced me to the idea of sonodynamic therapy, which is what SonALAsense is developing as a new modality to treat cancer. My interests in my career have really focused on 3 things, really. First-in-class science. Secondly, translating that science into clinically meaningful results for patients. And the third thing is a world-class set of founders and experienced drug developers. And we've done all those 3 things at SonALAsense. So we're looking to develop our technology that's a non-invasive way to treat cancer into a new way to treat brain tumors and eventually tumors outside the brain. And look forward to talking more about that today.
Dr. Benaim, tell me about yourself.
Thank you, Peter. I'm Benaim, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer. I'm a pediatric hematologist, oncologist by training, specialized in stem cell transplantation. Was for 12 years at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where I did a lot of clinical research in cells, drugs, and device, and later moving into industry. So I have over 25 years of clinical research in drug development and drug and device combination development. So since I was a little kid, I wanted to take care of kids with cancer and went to train to one of the top places in the world, stayed there in the faculty. And when I moved to industry with the intention to move discoveries and new therapies for patients with cancer, pediatrics and adult, in a much faster way than we could have done it in the academic world. So my career has been in many different companies, developed, like I said, compounds, drugs, cell therapy, and drug-device combinations to treat really the most complicated and what I like to call the more catastrophic type of cancers. My previous company, it's a company based on treating brain tumors called Novocure. When I was there, the chief medical officer, and I moved into SonALAsense, where I found a very interesting cutting-edge technology to treat cancer in a completely new way. So I felt that this is the company that can make difference in how patients are treated with very bad, terrible solid tumors.
Now, one thing I noticed is that the company is not just saying it is trying to change the treatment of patients diagnosed with cancer, but you're actually eradicating cancers, including diseases like glioblastoma or high-grade gliomas and other forms of brain cancer. Tell me a little bit more about this, Dr. Benaim.
This therapy, it is a completely different way of treating patients. Usually, especially patients with brain tumor, even the initial presentation many times is already devastating, right? With many neurological deficits for these patients. And the first line of therapy is surgery. So basically, open the brain, you open the head and go after the tumor. And most of these tumors are not round, nice, clean golf ball. These are tumors that really infiltrate into the brain parenchyma. And it is very hard to be able, with surgery, to take the whole tumor. And unfortunately, what happens is that the tumor recurs. So usually therapy is to do surgery first, then radiation, then chemotherapy. Usually that's where you then sit and wait to see what happens. So our therapy, and I would let Mark talk more about the development of this technology, but our therapy is really a neurosurgical approach using an IV formulation of a drug that has been used for a long time for selecting the tumors for surgery. But our technique allows to treat those tumors directly without having to invade the skull. So no surgery, and we use ultrasound waves to activate a substance that eventually damage the cancer cells and not the normal cells. Basically, this is a surgery without a scalpel.
That's a fine way to describe it, Ellie. As you mentioned, Peter, surgery is one option. One non-invasive option that's currently being used is radiation therapy. But it comes with tremendous and debilitating side effects. And what we hope to do with our non-invasive sonodynamic therapy is to treat the tumor and kill the tumor selectively without affecting normal tissue. Radiation has bystander effects as well and doesn't just kill the tumor, but can have effects on healthy tissue as well. And that's what leads to some of the side effects. So what we hope to do is to use our non-invasive procedure to treat brain tumors without affecting normal tissue. And the early data we have shows that we have an encouraging and well-tolerated procedure. And obviously, with chemotherapy, that there's significant side effects as well. We don't see that with our therapy.
So when you look at chemotherapy, our body's defenses, the blood-brain barrier, makes it very difficult for chemotherapy to be effective or even work. It simply doesn't pass through to where it needs to be. Your approach is different and is not hampered by the blood-brain barrier. Can you tell me a little bit more about this, Dr. De Souza?
So what sonodynamic therapy is, it's a drug-device combination. The drug is actually a nutrient that tumors need, actually any oxygen-consuming cell needs. And it's only a small molecule. It's only a 5-carbon molecule. So there are no issues whatsoever with penetration of the blood-brain barrier. Our drug readily crosses the blood-brain barrier and is taken up by tumor cells in far greater amounts than normal cells. And tumor cells very selectively convert our drug into a compound that is activated by the ultrasound to blow up the tumor cell. Normal cells do not accumulate this compound. And that's why when the ultrasound is given, the ultrasound does not have an effect on normal cells. That's the specificity of sonodynamic therapy.
And so the small drug that you give a patient or that you have is taken up by the cells, right? But then it is changed in something else that has no place in healthy cells. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
And then with further treatment, it basically eradicates cancers.
So you can think of this nutrient I referred to being converted into a smart bomb by the ultrasound.
Let's take a short break, and then we're back with Dr. Eli Benaim and Dr. Mark De Souza.
Clinical trials allow researchers to introduce new hope by providing participants access to cutting-edge and potentially life-saving treatments. Speak with your doctor and visit standuptocancer.org/clinical trials to learn more. Together, we can stand up for all of us.
This is the Onco'Zine Brief with Peter Hofland.
And welcome back. In today's episode of the Onco'Zine Brief, I'm talking with Dr. Eli Benaim and Dr. Mark De Souza. I'm Peter Hofland, and this is the Onco'Zine Brief. One of the centers dedicated to find a cure for brain cancer in the next decade is the Ivy Brain Tumor Center at Barrow Neurological Institute here in Phoenix, Arizona. The center personalizes brain tumor therapy, where the molecular underpinnings of each unique patient dictate their course of treatment. And patients come to the Ivy Brain Tumor Center from around the world to gain access to its array of clinical trials, finding treatment options when they actually are being told that there is no hope for them and that there is no treatment option for them. The team of Dr. Nader Senai, the center's director of neurological oncology, established a proof of concept for what you are developing or what you have developed, right? This proof of concept was based on a phase 02 trial. Now, tell me a little bit more about this proof of concept and the 02 trial, because I think some of our listeners may not necessarily know what a 02 trial is.
So this was what Ivy did, which is great. It was a study, we'll call it phase 0 and then phase 1. So it was 2 studies in one. Again, we administered the IV drug, this nutrient 5-ALA, and then the patients received the sonodynamic therapy. When we want to talk about phase 0, these are studies to learn about the biology response to a tumor. So the objective is not to cure the patient, correct? The objective is to learn the activity of a drug, a therapy, biologically in a patient. And a phase 1 is when you want to learn how a drug is distributed through the body after it's given. As you know, many drugs have to be absorbed. They go through the liver, they go through the kidneys. So we need to learn how the drug gets distributed in the body. In the case of an IV drug, we look, obviously it's not taken by mouth, but it also goes through a process of getting used and discarded by the body. So there's something called pharmacokinetics, from movement of the drug through the body. So we do what we call PK or pharmacokinetics to learn how the drug is uptake by the body, by the different cells, and how it's metabolized and released. In this case, what was very interesting, and this is that phase 0 part, is Dr. Sinai took 10 patients with recurrent glioblastoma, so patients that have had already the standard of care and have recurred, and were candidates for second surgeries. These patients then